Good afternoon. Now being the hour of 4 o'clock, we're going to have a board meeting, a regular board meeting for Vallecitos Water District. Can I have a pledge of allegiance by, we're going to ask Ed Pedrizzi. Which one is it? Pedrazzi. He's going to lead us in the pledge.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Pedrazzi. Okay, roll call, please. Diane?
Director Evans?
Here.
Director Hernandez? Director Cole?
Here.
Director Sinella?
Here.
Director Martin?
Here. Okay, I'm going to ask a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting of today, January 22nd.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, then I'm going to ask employee Bridget. Anderson. Leave your name in front.
Sorry, the cheat sheet was I knew her first name.
Somewhere.
It's on the certificate.
Hi, Bridget. So maybe come on this side, please, that way, so everyone can see you. Bridget joined the district 18 months ago and is a human resource technician. And I met Bridget just about that time, just about when we were in the office. Today we're presenting Bridget with a certificate of completion of a program offered by the International Public Management Association for Human Resources. It's a long acronym, but nobody cares. Which is designed to meet the unique needs of public sector HR professionals, and anything about the public sector were quite different from the private sector as far as the rules and regulations. This program is called Public Sector HR Essentials and was delivered online with a course schedule and administrator similar to an online college course. There were 8 modules that lasted 2 to 4 weeks. Long time. Included interactive learning through online discussion with other public sector HR professionals and written assignments. Upon completion of the 8 modules, the final exam was given. Bridget started the program in August and completed in December, just 5 months. And where did you come to us from 18 months ago?
City of Escondido.
I knew that. I just like everyone to know, we steal people from all over the place. Good job. And Mrs. Tippett, anything you'd like to say?
Thank you very much for presenting.
All right, well, congratulations.
Thanks, Al. That's how you got your high school degree, wasn't it, Dennis? What's that? Isn't that how you got your high school degree?
Yeah, but it only took 4 classes, not 8.
All right. Next is oral communications. I don't believe we have any, so there are none, so I won't read through all of that. Notice to the public, we're not going to have that, so we don't need that. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Looking for a motion to approve 1.1, 1.2, 1.3.
Mr. President,
Yes.
can I pull 1.2, please, for some
1.2.
discussion?
Okay, so we're going to do a motion, a second, and then we're going to have you ask you questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need a motion?
All motion.
So moved
I'll
and
second.
seconded?
I'll say.
Okay, and go ahead, Director Sinella.
Thank you. And this is probably just some newbie questions here, but on the warrants list, it's through January 22nd. Does it start on the last regular meeting, which is January 8th?
Correct.
And if you would, for Director Sinella and for the visiting viewing audience, tell us your name.
Sure. My name is John Fusco. I am the finance manager here at the district.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You don't need to smile because the camera's facing you.
Okay, yeah. The warrants list is dated that because it's the date of the meeting. But what we do is we cut checks intermittently. We have a schedule, and then occasionally there's other check runs that happen if we need to get a check out so that we meet deadlines and not incur late fees. So the checks are, for the most part, between the board meetings, but occasionally there might be a check that we've already cut that didn't get on this warrants list, that'll be on the next warrants list.
I see. I think I saw a couple of those. And so is it safe, the timeframe's roughly the last meeting, January 8th was the last regular meeting, and to roughly today then? Is that the kind of period that we're looking at?
And maybe a few days before the January 8th,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then the other question I had is there another report that shows the recurring expenses? Some of these like SDG&E and manpower and other ones that we get hit either weekly, monthly, or whatever it might be. Is there another report that kind of separates the recurring versus the case-by-case or one-time expenses?
This is the only report that we have right now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, looking at November, speaking of SDG&E, looking at the power expense for November was roughly $40,000, and then in December, we only had $2,600 and some changes. Did we get a discount in December, or?
Yeah, that would have been nice. Well, what it is timing differences. We have a lot of meters throughout the district,
Okay.
and what happens is they'll read this meter, and then we'll get a bill for that. They'll read these meters, and we'll get a bill for those, and so we end up writing several checks to SDG&E.
So we may get, the next report might have a catch-up for December?
Or a lower amount, depending on what meters they read. For instance, this facility is rather large. It uses a lot of electricity. The treatment plant is rather large and uses a lot of electricity. So when either of those two appear either on the same warrant or in different warrants, then the amounts fluctuate.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Is there an attempt to put those on the same warrants?
We just, not really, because what we want to do is make sure we get them and pay them so that we don't incur any late fees. Yeah.
Okay, so in-house, when you receive a bill today, the 22nd, when is it paid?
We look at the due date and make sure that it's paid before the due date. Yeah, if it's 30 days, we make sure before February.
Because there's no set time, you just look at the due date and make sure it's paid.
Mhm.
By them, the leeway of 2 days, 3 days, 5 days?
Within where it falls within the AP, what we call the AP calendar, when we're going to pay every 2 weeks, we have the AP set up, the accounts payable set up to cut checks. Yeah.
So that's all done, it's just a matter of pushing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Sure,
President.
Debbie.
John, I like this idea about a recurring separated from intermittent. Is that a possibility to look into at some point? It's always
It's-
a possibility, I realize.
We have other reports that kind of reflect that information, and actually in his board packet as well. The revenue and expense report is really a summarization of all of our expenses by month incurred rather than paid, so for accounting purposes. So, and most of those are written by check, most of those expenses are. So you can kind of look at the combination of those two. Yeah, here's our checks that we actually write, but the revenue expense report, these are the expenses that we incur within that time frame, and it kind of eliminates that timing difference for power and such.
I understand that. I was thinking it might just be easy to run through the warrant list that way. Doesn't matter. Thank you.
Perhaps that might be something for us to bring up during our workshop session, if we have other questions like that, or ways we think, because I know the metering count and those kind of things, questions I've asked Dennis about, like, I don't really care about the metering count, I don't understand it, but in the past it meant something, I guess, so.
It was just a preference of the board. The board used to want to know exactly how, but it goes back to the boom time. There were so many meters coming and going, they wanted to keep track of it. As indicated Friday, when we go through the budget and your orientation, we'll show you how a lot of this does track.
Okay.
Where it's power by facility, by site, and so it might break that down a little bit better before. It's something we can take a look at, if the board wants.
I appreciate that, because the only description that we had was powered for November and powered for December, and there was about $38,000 difference between the 2 months.
Sure.
I was just wondering if something happened special in December.
It's all those holiday lights.
Well, it was actually $38,000 less in December, so I don't know if.
They're just different
We don't
meters.
celebrate
Yeah.
holidays.
Okay. But thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Going to have probably quite a few newbie questions.
Seeing no other questions? Call for the vote? Oh, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 All against? All abstaining?
No, I said aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. I was trying to guess it. I'm missing. Action items, all right, then we 2.1.
Yes, I'll
Resolution.
actually have John come back up on this one as well.
Okay. Is a resolution for San Luis County Credit Union.
Sat down too fast, Back in October, we had brought to the board several resolutions for the financial institutions that the district does business with and has deposits on file and also makes investments through. Their Mission Federal Credit Union was one of them, San Diego County Investment Pool was another, Local Agency Investment Fund was another, and San Diego Credit Union it was another one. When when you adopted all those resolutions, we sent them out to those financial institutions, and all but one were accepted, and this one, San Diego County Credit Union, came back, and they said the way that it's written up, it's either all or nothing. We either have to grant the powers to all the people that are named on it, or no powers, sorry about that. And so what this is basically bringing it back, granting all the powers to all three general manager, assistant general manager, and myself to perform all the actions on the resolution.
Any questions?
Move to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Move to the next item, 2.2, BAE Systems Access Agreement.
Yes, I'll actually take this one. A lot of you are familiar with the, I'm not sure what's in that building now. It used to be the Singer building. It was Singer Kierfot. It's been a variety of electronics companies over the years. Pardon me? Now it's morphed into, I think there's a church in there and some other type activities. As indicated in the memo, from 63 to about 88, they did a lot of electronic development of parts for the military and a variety of other things. And if you were ever out there any time that it rained, the parking lot was really pretty. It was really shimmery and had lots of blue, gold, green colors, and that matches the chemicals that are the contaminants. In the past, they did come into the site because they did receive a cleanup and abatement order from the San Diego Regional Board. They removed a significant amount of contaminated soil off the district's property out in the back. Most of you have been to the lift station. Out back is just a field. Once the bulk was removed, they did some additional testing and they put in 3 groundwater monitoring wells on the site. And then there were a couple installed off-site down south of Discovery Street before it went into the creek, into the San Marcos Creek. During the period that they did monitor the groundwater, there was no groundwater contamination found on our property. So that issue was off the table. The regional board accepted those reports that there was no groundwater contamination. The wells have been since removed and sealed, so there are no more wells on the property. What you have before you today is an access agreement with BAE Systems, which is the successor to Singer Kierfot. It identifies the terms and conditions for them to access the property. There's quite a package attached in the board meeting. A lot of it is just the technology of what they have to use, where they have to remove it. They are required to obtain all the permits from City of San Marcos as far as excavation permits, hauling permits, soil, dust abatement, everything along those lines. They will have their own experts on site, but we will also be monitoring them. As the excavation takes place, we will do an additional soil testing to see if there's any contamination in an area greater than what they believe it is. They will continue to excavate until we get to clean soil. As indicated here, the metals of concern are copper, chromium, vinyl chlorides, and lead. Those are the items that are in the soil. Once they get completed with this and we find no additional residual, the San Diego Regional Board will issue a no further action letter, and that basically says the site is now clean. They're cleaning it to what we call residential standards. Residential standards meaning they could then come in and actually build homes on it. So that's the standard that they take it to. If at some point in the future the district ever uses that property, we do have a project on it, a flow equalization basin, which is a raw sewage flow equalization basin back there. Don't know if that will make it through the next master plan as feasible, but if it does, it is a project. If we were to build that and we did encounter additional contaminated soil at any time in the future, BAE Systems is still on the hook to come back in and clean it up. It's cradle to grave the way they look at Superfund contamination. So BAE owns it forever. So we don't have any risk from that standpoint. So what you have before you today is the access agreement for the property, and staff would recommend the approval of the access agreement.
Questions?
correctable?
Yeah, it's been there for quite a while. In fact, it's kind of limited the sale of that property and so on, so.
Yeah.
It's good to see they're getting rid of that, so.
I believe they've completely remediated the other side where the church and everything else is. We actually had a request from, I forget the last name of the one church that was in there. They wanted to use the property for parking, but with that out there, it was better not to start putting people out there.
Sure.
So we didn't pursue that. But this is the last piece of the cleanup.
That's great.
So I think you already answered my question, but if we go in there, we're gonna be digging 40 or 50 feet down to put in a submerged eucalyptus tank, and we find contamination, BAE is still on the hook for it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because residential standard wouldn't be 40 or 50 feet down.
No, but if, like I said, residential is from the surface up, anything that could percolate, reasonable excavation, but we get all the way down there and we find it, we bring them right back.
Thank you.
Move to-
Okay, there's an action item? Yes. Need a motion?
move to approve?
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. 2.3, Linda Vista Sewer Pipeline Award.
Yes, Mr. Scholl?
Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
And
Good afternoon.
your name and title.
Oh, sure. President Martin, members of the board, my name is Robert Scholl, and I'm the district's capital facility engineer. Item I have before you here is, well, it's actually a quite lengthy recommendation section here, but it originates here for the construction approval for the Linda Vista East Sewer Project. So just to kind of recap here exactly what this project is, what we're doing here is we are installing approximately 3,280 feet of 15-inch wastewater pipeline. And you can see the alignment here. We're going from the intersection of Las Posas Road and Linda Vista Road, excuse me, up to Villa Veracruz, and then we'll go north on Villa Veracruz for a few hundred feet before taking a turn going east and going through it's the Encore manufacturing parking lot, which is owned by Bixby Land Company, and then crossing also into a vacant lot that is owned currently by the city of San Marcos. And it'll turn northeast into Grand Avenue, and then it'll kind of zigzag just a little bit there, and we'll actually have a Jack and Bohr tunneling under State Highway 78. And the pipeline will come out at the intersection of Los Vallecitos and Bingham. The pipeline, the reason why we're doing this project is the pipeline is, first of all, it's an 8-inch pipeline that's currently in the ground. And you can't really tell on the figure, but there's a real thin red line that shows the existing infrastructure out there. The existing 8-inch pipeline is severely undersized for not only current demands, but obviously for ultimate demands as well. And it's also subject to a lot of inflow and infiltration. There's a portion of it that goes through a creek that actually there's a manhole in there where got a nice video of it showing water. It's not coming through the top of the manhole lid. It's actually coming into the sides there between the shaft portion and the top of the manhole. So there's quite a bit of I&I issues with this existing sewer as well.
I'm sorry, I&I issue.
I&I, inflow and infiltration, yeah. Sorry, you gotta stop using these engineering terminologies here. Just to recap from I was here at the November 25th meeting, presenting on the very same project. We completed the design for this project in late August, and originally we had open bids on October 30th for this project. We received several bids on this, and the range of those were about 1.6 million to approximately 1.5 million, in that range. And what we got was a request for bid relief from Dick Miller Incorporated, which was the low bidder at the time. They stated they made a clerical error in their bid. based on that. And based on that, we excused them. And then we had other issues with the next few bids as well, ranging from they weren't giving all of the required documentation. They had issues there with demonstrated work experience, et cetera. So I came before the board on November 25th and asked if the board would approve rejecting all bids for this and authorize us to rebid the project, which was then granted. So we re-advertised the project the very next day on November 26th. On December 19th, we opened bids. We had 5 bids total. They ranged from $1.88 million to approximately $2.5 million. I'm sorry, $2.25 million, with Charles King Construction being the lowest bid. And as you can see here from the bid breakdown, the first 4 bids from this there are actually very tight, ranging from $1.88 million to about $1.98 million. So one of my first recommendations will be to award this construction contract to Charles King Construction in the amount of $1.88 million. Another part here is the construction engineering services for the project here. Harris and Associates, they were our design engineer for the project. We are proposing an amendment to their contract in the amount of $77,479. This will include a variety of construction-related engineering services, such as surveying. They'll lay out all the surveying that's needed for the contractor. Plus, they'll be providing all the geotechnical observations, inspections, as well as the geotechnical testing for the trench and backfill sections. And also, this contract amendment would be covering design modifications that are needed during construction as well, and also as-builting. And finally, as you can see here in the physical impact section of the staff report, there is a shortfall of approximately $400,000 over what was budgeted for this project. And there's a couple main reasons for this here. The first one being there's approximately a 750-foot section of pipeline, and that's shown in the figure here, that goes through the city of San Marcos property to Grand Avenue. This pipeline was originally going to be constructed by the city of San Diego when they were doing their drainage improvement project on this property. Their project's been delayed a bit, and so to avoid delaying our project, we decided that we'd go ahead and take this here, and the city is going to reimburse us for the portion that they should have.
I'm sorry, did you mean to say City of San Marcos?
Yes.
Okay.
You said San Diego.
San Diego. I'm like,
City of
what?
San Marcos, excuse me, yes.
That would be great. That'd be great if you could do
Yeah.
that.
So that's approximately $235,000 that the project budget didn't account for. And then the second reason here is bids did come in quite a bit higher than what our construction cost estimate was. Our engineer's estimate was about $1.62 million, and the actual low bid came in approximately $250,000 higher than this here. And of course, one of the big reasons for that there is probably because of the improving economy. It has been driving up construction prices here over the last year or so. So with that there, I've got 3 recommendations for you. Staff recommends, first of all, authorizing an increase of $400,000 in the Linda Vista East Sewer Project budget for a total project budget of $2,750,000. Second recommendation is to award the Linda Vista East Sewer Project construction contract to Charles King Company, Incorporated, in the amount of $1,881,893.34. And the third recommendation is to authorize an amendment to Harrison Associates contract in the amount of $479 to include additional construction phase services. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I'm just curious, we, from the original bids that we had to start over with, how many of these are rebidding?
There were, I believe, all 5 that rebid
Were ones with bid
were original bidders.
Excuse me, point of order, if I could, Mr. Scholl and Director Evans. The low bidder on the project, because of the relief, as a condition of granting that relief, they were precluded from rebidding the project.
Oh, I understood
That's-
that. Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure that, I wanted to really address Mr. Scholl's comment that all 5 had rebid, because clearly one of them couldn't.
Right. No, I did, thank you, I understood that. I was just curious, so the bids are, and were the bids higher in the interim from where they were originally, and you're saying that's because the economy's gone up? Or were these the same bid amounts? I'm just curious.
Oh, from the original bid to the rebid?
Yes.
Yeah, and let me correct myself first of all here. From the original 7 bidders, we had 4 returning
Returning.
bids, and then it looks like we have 1 additional, and that was Shilling Paradise Corporation. And as far as the bid amounts here, the low bid, you throw out the low bid there, and then the issues that we had originally with like the 2nd and 3rd and 4th bidder. If you take the average here, we believe the average to actually be a little bit less during the rebid than it was during the original bid. They were certainly more tight than the original bids.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So, but overall prices are going up, you're saying, on
Yeah.
bids because the economy's up? And
That,
my-
yes.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was on the additional money for the construction phase with Harrison Associates.
Mhm.
You said it was for design modification. This is design modification that, when did we discover the design modification from when we first came up with our idea to?
This is a placeholder. So,
Placeholder.
yeah, so, and it happens frequently, unfortunately, here. You
Okay.
run into, for instance, utilities here that those weren't identified, we didn't know they were there. That's an example. Okay, so there needs to be a little bit of a redesign. This is intended to cover small design modifications.
Oh, thank you,
Mhm.
okay. I know it's not unusual, I just thought maybe it just suddenly happened and I
Yeah.
was confused by it. Thank you, I believe that was all my questions.
Director Porter?
Yes, we've dealt with Charles King Company before, right? They just did the
Yes, sir.
little
Interceptor.
modification that we did a few months ago, and let's see, we added on a little bit to that to get across the road, I remember something like that.
Yeah, they've been a very good contractor. You may recall, I think we added close to $1 million as an amendment to the Interceptor.
Yeah.
Because they were doing such a good job. They already had all the bypass pumping in place.
Right.
For such a big pipe, we extended it past Grand Avenue.
Right.
Charles King is also the one that's done a lot of the bypass pumping and the sewer work over in Encina. So they're very highly recommended.
Good,
Yeah.
good, okay.
That's always good to hear. Have we used Harris before?
I don't believe we've used Harris for a number of years.
This is their first contract in many
Yeah.
years.
And is that part of a bid as well?
That's professional services. We started with the design of this project. It goes through the professional services process where we invite several firms, engineering firms, to propose on a project, and then it's qualification-based for professional services. And so we select what we feel is the most qualified based on their project manager, their team, the scope, and the approach that they give us, as well as their proposed man hours and fee estimate.
Okay, so yeah, my question is, that this is not a bid process necessary for
That's
this
correct.
That's correct.
Because of,
We cannot bid professional services. We're precluded from that. The purchasing policy that the board approved, the modifications a few months ago, it had all the different levels of which point we have to invite outside consultants. You may recall we have the as-needed contracts for, I think, 5 different firms. They're allowed to bid on some of them, but again, we can't do it on price. We have to base it on qualifications. And then the negotiations come down to the final scope afterwards.
okay, any other questions from the board?
Mr. President?
Yes.
So, just so I can understand the math correctly, the 78,000 for the construction phase services, well, my first question with that is, did any of the other bids include that as part of more of a turnkey approach, or would it be separate no matter who we selected?
Yeah, the other engineering firms, way back when we were going out for design, they did not. And no, we typically do not do that. We typically keep those two separate.
Okay. And you said the 78,000 is a placeholder, so we may not use it all or any of it.
Well, a portion is a placeholder here for design modifications, but the majority of that there is actually dedicated to like the surveying and also the geotechnical observation and testing. The geotech is actually a very big portion of that $78,000.
So we're gonna use it then?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, I know that you have this, the contingency in there, but if I'm looking at the $236,000 that we're gonna get reimbursed by the city, combined with a possible another $141,000 in this contingency if we don't use it, that budget shortfall of $400,000 may actually close to closer to $25,000?
That
Yeah,
is correct.
that could be
Yeah.
real.
We're just doing it from the math standpoint, so when the
Yeah.
board approves it, we have a set thing. The actual construction contingency, as noted, that's actually required by policy
Yeah,
as
I
well.
see that.
So our hope is, when we come back to you in 6 months, we didn't use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Then they look like heroes. Mr. Director Fulham?
I'd like to make a motion, we accept the staff recommendation.
Have a motion? Need a
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to 2.4, San Marcos Chamber event and installation dinner, and the staff is looking for direction.
Pretty short and sweet.
We have I'll keep it short and simple. We have a San Marcos Chamber event coming up, their installation luncheon. And I guess the question that is being asked of us, and I don't know how it's been handled in the past, and it doesn't really matter, but it is, should per diem be paid for attending this? And should we even be, or should we just have our meal paid for, or should we do both? Or, so I leave that open for discussion.
Thank you, Mr.
Director
President.
Evans.
I feel on something like this, it's sort of our responsibility as the board to go. And so I think if we choose to go, it's fine to pay the ticket cost, but I don't think that we necessarily need a per diem. I would prefer we did not. I believe that's what we did with the State of the City address as well. I think all we need to do is be there and represent ourselves.
Okay. Do the directors want to weigh in? Director
Yeah,
Fulham?
I would agree with Director Evans that we do have, I don't know if it's necessarily a responsibility, but certainly it kind of comes with the territory when you're in these public positions that you're going to attend street fairs and chamber events and other community events. And I don't know if the per diem is necessary, but if there are any expenses that are incurred for attending these, that may be reasonable. I would like to ask staff, again, as the new person here, what's some of the historical precedent on that?
As Director Evans did indicate, I think the last time we had the State of the City one, the board agreed that we'd pay the attendance and expenses, but not the per diem. Out of all of the items that are on the policy that dictates board per diems, that San Marcos, City of San Marcos and the chamber events are on a case-by-case basis. And historically, the last few times it's come before the board took the action to pay for expenses, but not per diem.
I could support that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Director
I
Fulham?
think it's a great idea.
Okay, my question to the board would be, I believe in we shouldn't get per diem, we're not doing anything, we're eating for free, if we choose to go that route. My only question is, I certainly understand the city's, state of the city address. I think that's something we need to be part of, especially seeing we're building relationships with it. I'm really not sold on the San Marcos Chamber event. I think if people want to go to that, they certainly can. It's a fundraiser for the chamber. But I don't know whether that's something we want to fund. We don't really get to talk to that many people. I don't know. Just a question I'm throwing out there for the other three. I personally believe the State of the City is important. I don't think the chambers are that an important luncheon to go to, in my opinion. Just mine. So anyone else wants to weigh in on what they think? There's a lot of organizations.
I would probably, I would agree with that, but, all we're paying for is the meal, so it's not that much to me, so.
If I may, I think let's, at this point, I would prefer that we say it's open for any of us who would like to go at expenses paid, and depending on how many of us show and how we feel about it, let's discuss afterwards. I won't be able to go, actually, I'm not here that day, but.
Anyone else have a question?
I agree. I think with all the discussion, I don't think per diem is warranted. And as far as expenses, I think we should continue to do what the district has been doing and just discuss them case by case.
Okay, so case by case, we have two cases coming up. We have the chamber case, we do a different vote on it. What do you want to do? There are two different items, actually.
Well,
We just want direction.
if I might, all they need is a motion and, a majority is to say yes or no as far as expenses on this issue. The city one will be coming on the next agenda. We just got the invitation on that. We did talk about this briefly, Director Martin, with the workshop coming up that the board will have for goals and objectives, strategic plan. I think this is a really good topic to really kind of clarify policy at that point. And maybe just deal with them case by case until we get there.
And I think that's fine, but
So I'll make a motion then on, what is it, the?
Chamber.
Chamber, thank you. That we not get per diem, and that if anybody wants to go, that the district will pay for the meal.
Second that.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One against, Hal.
Thank you.
Next, we go to quarterly investment report, which I believe will be Tom. With or without a beard?
Okay, looks like we're gonna looks like we'll hand this off to John this time.
Going back to John, wow.
Yeah, you do have before you the quarterly investment report. John's here
Pay
to,
raise.
well, he has to grow a goatee.
Now, Tom, yeah.
He's got to grow a goatee.
I'll work on that. Okay, beginning on page 63 of your agenda is the quarterly investment report. The investment report comes to you monthly, but in our investment policy, there's a presentation that is to happen quarterly regarding the investment report. What we have is, in front of you is first of all, we have sufficient funds within our operating account to meet all of our district obligations for the next 30 days and also to meet expenditure requirements for the next 6 months without having to dip into our investments, without having to liquidate any of our investments. So we're good in that capacity there. A little bit more detail as far as what we purchased over the quarter. About $500,000 in agencies, about $300,000 in CDs, and $1.5 million in commercial paper. We had one of our agencies be called. That means that the agency who put it out called it and said, we're going to take this back now instead of waiting to maturity. So they gave us the money early for that. And we also had $3 million of commercial paper mature over the past quarter. Our weighted average yield for all of our investments is 0.512, which is actually going down from 0.530. Our weighted average days to maturity, how far out we're investing, has gone down also. It went from 543 days to 516 days. A lot of that has to do with the money that we received from bond proceeds back in December 2012 that are now being spent in the various projects. So we're using those bond proceeds to pay for those expenditures there. The graphs begin on page 64. We're very diversified, very safe. Our investment policy calls for safety, liquidity, and yield in those orders. So we want to be safe investments. We want to make sure we're liquid, we can get out our money, and then the yield, the return is last. The schedules begin on page 67, and what you have is the first schedule is by fund, and that's really how the accounting is done. The different reserve funds and the pots of money in each of those funds. The next schedule is how it's by type. Each type of investment that we have is listed out there. And we are within all of our policy limits for all of our types. It's basically an informational report, unless you have any questions.
Any questions from the board?
No. Yes, Mr. President. Just, again, just curious, looking at your chart here on 64, it seems that there's a significant increase in the amount that we have invested in agencies. Was that part of a strategic decision or plan, or is there any rhyme or reason, or is that just how it worked out?
It's just how it worked out there. That increase comes in about December 2012 when we received the bond proceeds.
Mhm.
And we knew that we would need some bond proceeds right away. We'd need some 6 months from now, some 9 months from now, so that's how we invested.
Okay.
If I might on that note, some of the bond proceeds that John just spoke about, you actually just awarded. So
Okay.
the Linda Vista sewer pipe, that was one of the projects in the $7 million issue that we received. So part of the money we knew would be within a 1-year period, so that's why they kept them liquid to get to them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well said.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
Thank you, John.
That's an action item? Yes? No?
For information only.
Information only.
Information only. Moving on to reports. General manager report.
Yes.
Are you gonna be giving that? Tom's not doing anything today, right?
Donald's not doing anything today.
Okay.
He should be back at his desk working. A couple items, I did send you a brief email out. We had a sludge solid source main break down at the treatment plant. For Director Snella, this is the solid source main, you'll get a better idea when we take you down there. Part of the byproduct, when you treat wastewater, once we reclaim all the water, what's left is the solids. Sludge, whatever you want to call it. We, as an agency, do not handle nor process the solids here at our own treatment plant. It's very labor-intensive, odor-intensive, and risk. So what we do is we ship it to Encina as a member agency. That's where we have the Pure Green biosolids program where we recycle it all. So we still take care of it, we just don't deal with it here. It's a dedicated pipeline. It's a 6-inch pipeline that went in 1978-ish, give or take. It was a developer-driven project. I've given the board the history on this in the past. We've had probably 5 breaks on this over the past couple of years. It's all been corrosion-related from construction issues from back in that area. The board has already funded the project. We're well into design, if not almost completed with design. We'll be going up to...
Working on 90%.
Okay, so we're at about 9% design. The bottom line is what we did spill was about 1,230 gallons total. There are alarms on this pipe to where if pressure ever goes out on the pipe, it triggers an alarm, it shuts everything down automatically, and staff responds. Out of the 1,270 that was spilled, we recovered about 510 of it. So about 700 plus gallons actually made it down to the storm drain system. The health department did not require us to either sample the creek nor post. They felt it was not sufficient quantity to warrant anything. So the repair was completed, I think Friday, and so they took care of it. Temporary repair, but again, it's part of the project that the board has funded to replace.
Fair to Paul.
Is that the same area that a few board meetings ago, we saw how pipes were crisscrossing and we're
Yeah.
talking about design?
It's the exact same, it's all the pipes that were in the same easement, and again, what they did is they had 3 pipes, and they put them all within one easement, side by side, and then you went through one of the oldest parts of the North County, that old Metal Arc area. And just another bit of information, you probably never knew it, that actually used to be called the Belford Village Water District. Yeah, so that area right there was actually the Belford Village Water District. San Marcos County Water District absorbed it in the early to mid-60s. We actually took it over. So that was an acquisition of a smaller water agency that used to be within our service area. So it's been around a long time, but there's so much stuff going through that area, it's pretty tricky.
Did that disrupt the church parking lot again?
No, no.
They must like us.
What did it disrupt?
Could you come up?
Was it a yard? Was it a roadway? Was it a sidewalk?
The break was just past the northernmost or westernmost entrance into the church parking lot. And if it's got to be in a spot, it was probably in the best spot it could have been. There's a little turnout area right there. and that's where it broke. But this time, compared to last, it seemed to be a little more violent. It actually lifted asphalt up off the ground and was coming out through there. But we were able to stay out of the roadway for the most part. There was still easy passage for customers through there.
And if you could walk me through the events as they happened, who knew what went where?
The alarm actually didn't go off right away. The brake, the ground will keep some of the pressure, even though there's a hole in the pipe, will keep some of the pressure in there, so we didn't get an alarm immediately. Someone from the city of San Marcos actually contacted us saying we had water running down the street. That call went to our construction duty person. He was there within just a few minutes, was quickly able to discern that it was wastewater, not fresh water. I won't go into details, but he immediately contacted the duty operator for the treatment plant who happened to be on site. And so the pump was immediately shut down, and it was this individual's very first duty with us. He hasn't worked for the agency that long. And so he actually did a great job. His supervisor, Don McDougall, said that our operator, Ivan Magura, did a fantastic job, was able to get the solids that were still in the line pulled back into the plant, and then quickly got the spill kit. We have a bunch of material that we'll put in the creek to pond it up so that we can pump it back out, and quickly got that put out and did a great job. So that's why we're able to recover a little more than half of what we spilled.
Okay, and so from the time that we found out there was a problem to the time we actually got the pressure off of that, what kind of time lapse?
41 minutes. 41 minutes from the time we could tell on the trend when it broke, but it hadn't dropped the pressure quite enough yet to set off an alarm. So we had notification, we had a duty operator respond, and we had pump shut down and everything back into Metal Arc reclamation facility at 41 minutes.
Yeah, once we actually knew from the city, they notified the operator at 2:31, and at 2:41, everything was shut down and recovered. So they actually did it in 10 minutes, once they were at the plant.
And any complaints from anyone? Hit our phones?
No, actually, I went out to the site and talked to the guys working and made sure that, no one was coming out and yelling at them. We've had that before there, and they said no. I did see one gentleman come across the street and was enjoying a beverage. Apparently was watching the football game, and I stood there and watched him, and he was not belligerent. He was just curious what was going on. So, no.
Okay, well, great job. Great job taking care of that, thank you.
What size pipe was that?
That's a 6-inch, I believe, ductile.
6-inch ductile iron.
So you shut that off and you took everything down at Encina?
No, unfortunately, that's the one drawback of a scalping plant with local flow. Scalping meaning we pull it from some other source and send it down there. The solids, wastewater, the trick is it never stops. People don't stop. Now, luckily, it's early in the morning, so the flow is reduced, but the solids continue to build. So what they'll do is they'll actually bring pumper trucks down, big trucks, and they'll actually withdraw the solids, then they'll drive up to a different point that goes directly to Encina. So we'll dump into either number 1 lift station that we just talked about. We'll drive it all the way up there, dump in the wet well, then it goes to Encina. Luckily, at night, the flows are so reduced, we can just run a couple of trucks round robin until they do the repair.
When you said they, who's they? Who has these trucks?
Atlas Pumping is one of the big companies. We can use the Factors or big suction trucks. They just don't hold that much.
I think
So
we're using Diamond. I think
Diamond.
Diamond Environmental?
Yeah.
He's into everything.
He does everything.
He's into everything.
Temporary
He
fence,
promises, he
lighting.
drops it where he's supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Did you say that was at 2:31 in the morning or in the afternoon?
Afternoon.
In the afternoon. Those things I know is very fast. I applaud everyone, and I just hope I don't know, Ivan needs a gold star for his first.
I
That
agree,
was
he did a great
fantastic.
job. Yeah.
Amazing. Glad we get good people.
Yeah, he was still sweating when I got down.
Oh, that's fantastic. When do we start on that? When are we gonna get to that project?
We're at
working on it.
90% design. Rob, you have a schedule?
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Good job, Ed.
Yeah, so as the general manager said, we're approaching 90% design completion on this project right now. Couple obstacles that were in the way. One, we resolved, that was with the city of Carlsbad on the alignment that's gonna go through Melrose Drive. They had concerns on this here because they have the school at Poinsettia, as well as the traffic. They didn't want the entire road closed. They just wanted to keep us contained as much as we could so they can keep 2 lanes open. We talked with the city, we got through that. And the other portion is the most difficult parts of this project is getting out of the treatment plant because there's so many pipelines and other utilities in the driveway of the treatment plant there. So just trying to find the correct path to go through, and then doing a little bit of redesign and relocation of some of those facilities. We're working through that right now.
It's moving quickly.
Yes, and as far as the schedule, we would like to be out to construction on this by summer if we could.
Any other questions? No? Please continue with the report, Director.
Thank you.
Lang.
Diana, if you could bring up the presentation. Director Evans will probably hear a whole lot more about this tomorrow at the Water Authority Board meeting. You do have a copy of this presentation before you.
Actually, I put this together.
Yeah, Betty did. She knocked this out for me very quickly. You also have before,
And this is Lake Shasta.
that's Lake Shasta. You also have before you a copy of the press release that was issued by the Water Authority last week on Friday. And attached to that is the current policy that the district has with respect to drought allocation. So that is the ordinance number 162, which is what we have right now as a governing document that we would follow if other declarations are made by our wholesaler and their wholesaler. So at this point, we're not looking to invoke any additional language or any restrictions. I think this is going to continue to evolve over the next 2 months, depending on what the weather pattern is. But you figure March is the end of our rain period, rain season. That's the end of our water period. So we've got 2 months to go. We've had a March miracle before, but I wouldn't want to bank my paycheck on it. I'll go through this very quickly. This is a presentation that was given to the MAM. It's a member agency managers meeting for Director Snella. In SENA, as far including the Water Authority, we have a monthly meeting of all the managers that we talk about all the items that are coming forward on the agenda before the respective board meetings, so that we try to deal with all of the administrative, technical stuff. So when we bring things forward, it's as a whole. We don't have 26 agencies coming into the board meeting with 26 goals. We try not to do that very often. This is a presentation they made. Director Evans will be getting this. It's pretty simple. Record dry conditions in California. The State Water Project, Table A allocation, the board saw this, not this current board, but back in 2010 as the only other time in history where the initial allocation of the State Water Project was 5%. Now, it ended up by the end of the year increasing to 50, but there'd only been one, that was the first time in 2010 there'd ever been a 5% to start. This year, we started at 5% again, and as I go through this, you're gonna see there's not a whole lot of water coming into the system. If you look at the graph, you see the normal, and then you look at 2013-14 on that burgundy line, it's not looking good as far as that goes. The first snow season, the snow survey was done on January 3rd. As you can see, it's only 20% of average. The northern Sierra snowpack was only 11% of average at 1.4 inches. Again, they go out there and they, take a hole out of the snow. They determine the moisture content, because you can have dry snow, and you can have wet snow. What they do have is very dry. So even though that amount that's up there, it's very, very dry snow. This is the scariest one, and the pointer doesn't work real well on these things, but the very bottom red line that you see the chart, that's the 76-77 drought. That's the driest on record. Then you've got the 1923, 1924, and then you go on up, and you can see what the average is, with the blue in the middle being the overall average. When you go to the very bottom down there, you see that arrow pointing to it. We have now hit, at this point in time of January 1st, lower than the lowest on record as far as water rainfall. So it's, again, it's not looking good. And you can see this is a long-term trend on the amount of data that you have right here. This is Lake Orville. Again, the blue background is the normal average. And you've got the different, I can't read them all, you can see at the bottom of the chart down there, and you have the printout. But you can see where we're at on that light blue line. We're well below the 90, 76, 77, is that what that says?
76.
Okay, hey, my eyes aren't that bad. I can't read what's in front of me, but I can read that. So you can see we're continuing down as far as Lake Orville goes. It's not looking good. Again, that's to the north. That's part of the State Water Project. San Luis, you drove past it on the water education tours. You take,
We went to it.
they have visitor center. 3 years ago when I drove by it, I'd never seen the water all the way to the east side of the freeway. I mean, it was as full could be, all the way to the east side. We're down now lower than historical has ever been, and it is low. And even with San Luis, part of the concern they have is the clay core dam. So when they do release water, they have to do it slowly. They can't just do it quickly or it dries out the clay core in a different way, so it puts the face of the dam at risk. So that's some issues with San Luis. It's very dry in the Northern California section. Here's the storage. You've got two numbers here. 3.75 is a million acre feet with 99% as average of what they do fill, but we're only 67% of that right now. And then you've got San Luis, we're only at 34%. And Orville, you can see the difference on how low things are. The capacity is just way off. I mean, there's no water to move down the state to put it in storage. It's just not there. Colorado River, it's a whole different story. When you get into the Colorado River, which is the CRA, the Colorado River Aqueduct, where Met brings most of their water across from, where we get a big percentage of our water, they're at 96% of average. You can see by the colors, yellow is, I believe, above or average, but you just don't want to see red, and we just don't see any red in the Colorado River Basin. Snowpack's at 103%, Powell and Meade are at 45 and 52, pretty much where they've been, to be honest, for the last few years, but 1 or 2% in each of those reservoirs is a lot of water, so it makes a big difference.
Johnson, let me ask a question, because I've been out to Meade and Parker, and they look as empty as Shasta. So how come it doesn't show up that it's as empty as Shasta?
Shasta is a very cyclical reservoir. You've got to remember the primary role of Shasta is flood control and environmental. So they draw Shasta down as much as they can. When you've been on the dam, you saw the structure for the old crane that used to be in there.
Yeah.
They pull it down to that level every year in anticipation of a sudden runoff from snow. So that's why they pull that down. They have to. There's not enough bulk that Lake Meade and Powell can just take it. It doesn't matter. Lake Shasta, they have to pull it all the way down. Otherwise, they're spilling water.
But although they're not saying, or this chart isn't saying that Lake Meade is getting empty, it is. But you go look at it, it's like.
Yeah, oh, it's way down. The bathtub ring has got to be 75, 95 feet, if not more. Yeah, but we've been way down on Shasta and Meade and Powell for quite a few years now. But it's not emergency yet.
Las Vegas just sunk an emergency.
Las Vegas is
siphon.
spending a little over $1 billion. They're putting in I think it's their third outlet, because I want to say it's 1,075, I'm going by memory here, 1,075 triggers the next allocation of water supply from Lake Meade. They will actually have to get down below that because their outlet is approaching the point where they won't be able to get water. Once they hit, again, I'm going by numbers, let's say they hit 1,050, might be 1,070. That triggers the first allocation curtailments. California, because of the agreement on Lake Meade, California does not take an allocation shortage. All of the other states do. We still get our full allocation of the amount that is available.
But triggered allocation for Arizona and New Mexico, we're pretty close.
Oh, yeah. We're getting close. Yeah, I don't remember the exact difference in elevation, but it was something that everybody started talking about a couple of years ago because it is coming down. The good news, like I said, is from the Colorado River Aqueduct component, for the Southern California, LA area, the precipitation is normal, or a little bit above normal. So far, keep in mind, we've got 2 months to go. And if nothing else falls out there, we may end up at 73% of normal.
Hey Dennis, does any of that water go to Ventura, or is Ventura off the water project, California water project?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I was wondering where Ventura gets its water.
They've got a fairly large groundwater basin. I know Ventura has quite a bit of groundwater. I'm not sure if they come off the state water project or the Colorado River.
Because when they built that desal plant up in Santa Barbara, then just after that they hooked on to the water project.
Yeah, I think they're state water project.
I was going to say, the water that's in Lake Mead and Lake Powell, though, this was that gift that came with the big storm first,
A part-
right after, in what, November or December, because it was
Yeah.
looking even much worse.
A part of it's the gift from that storm, a part of it is carryover water that we have in there from Mexico because of the modification to the contract last year with the federal contract with Mexico. I don't think there's any other carryover water in there. I mean, it's on its way down. This is Metropolitan Water District. You've got the orange part at the bottom, that's emergency storage. That doesn't calculate into the amount of water. So when you see the green with a number in it, that's the amount in the green. That's not including that bottom. Because included in that bottom is dead pool, where they can't get to it either. There's the amount of storage at the bottom of a reservoir you just can't pull out. So you figure you go back 2006, and you can see how we went from 2.2 down to 1 in 2009. They started building it back up because of rainy season. They started out pretty well. So we're starting out 200,000 acre feet greater than we did the last time a drought started. So they do have a substantial amount of water in storage at Metropolitan. So they are in good shape. The question comes down to subsequent years, what happens?
Metropolitan, most of their storage at Skinner?
It's at Skinner and up at Diamond, East Side Reservoir.
Diamond.
Yeah, at all their various reservoirs. Yeah. We get into the local area, local reservoirs for storage around here. We're about 76% of normal. We have carryover storage. That's some of the water that's down in, what's the name of the reservoir we're raising? San Vicente. San Vicente, that's where some of the carryover storage is at. Yeah, out of the extra amount that we're raising San Vicente, a part of that is carryover storage. There's always going to be a vacant spot there to where if they can get extra water, we don't need it now, they take it and they dump it in there for this carryover for subsequent years, as well as emergency. Lindbergh Field and Ramona, 70 and 80%, which doesn't sound too bad, but then you look at the actual rainfall. You know, you're talking Lindbergh, 70% of normal, that's only 2 inches of rain. So it's not like we're a tropic area down here by any means. So it's one of those things when you look at a percentage versus what the number is, you've got to be very careful when you look at it. This is an interesting thing. You can see the fiscal year 2013 is in the striped boxes, and then the solid is for 2014. All of the agencies as an aggregate, we've managed to hold our water conservation in check. You can see how month by month we've actually overall held up. Then you can see what happened in December. So when you have a dry month like December normally is, you can see what happens. We went up by 7,000 acre feet greater than what historically happened. So we'll see what happens in January and February once we get through it. So there's no doubt that there's an impact the way people look at it when the rainfall drops off. This is just the NOAA, again, the ongoing predictions of what they think is going to happen. When you look at the far left chart, that's the probability of below. So we're in the first 2 tens, I think, not quite the third one. So, you know, what they're basically saying is, yeah, there's a 50% probability, because we're in the dark curve coming down to San Diego. There's a 50% probability of lower than normal, and I guess at this point they're right. January through March, so they're saying, okay, now we're down in the 40 percentile. So, you know, I wouldn't go out and buy any rainmaker stock, but it's definitely not looking good. The current actions, the governor did issue executive order to expedite voluntary transfers. As far as moving water around the state, if there's transfers that need to be made, they can expedite it and get through some of the hurdles legislatively and administratively to help move forward. He did form his interagency drought task force back in December 17th. He knew this was coming. The Department of Water Resources formed a new drought management team to prepare for potential third year. Keep in mind, we're not in the first year, we're in our second year right now. So they're talking about the third year.
Dennis, is a lot of that really for the Central Valley?
You know, right now, the Department of Water Resources controls the State Water Project, bringing the water down. So They are 5% allocation. So they're looking at Central Valley. You have a lot of fallowing that's gonna have to happen this year. You've got the dry farmers, lack of better terms, they seed and they hope for rain. In Northern California, Shasta and everything else is way down. So they've got to figure out what to do. I mean, it's to the point, I think Med even has water stored in Phoenix, if need be. They have wet weather storage in Phoenix and, you know, things like that, and the state probably does as well. They can bring it back. Statewide, it's varied. You've probably seen about the San Juan Water District's already asking them to reduce indoor use by 20% and no outdoor use. Lake Folsom is at historical lows. And if you look at the little thermometer, you can see they also indicate the dead pool at the bottom. So keep in mind, just because there's water in the reservoir doesn't mean you can get to it, nor would you want to be honest. Central Valley farmers, as you just indicated, Director Martin, it's going to be very tight this year up in the Central Valley unless there's a major storm event to the north. Impacts to San Diego, it's going to be an interesting dilemma with all of the improvements that Met's done over the last decade and all the improvements that the Water Authority's done over the last decade in response to the '93 drought. Southern California, LA South, is actually going to be in better shape than historically possible because there is storage down here now. The Water Authority's built the ESP, the Emergency Storage Program. They have the Imperial Irrigation District water. We have the fallowing land water where we're reclaiming water from the canal lining. Met has the reservoirs are full and the basin is full, is normal. It's Northern California, that's not. So it's going to be very interesting what moves forward. Right now, Met has not indicated any allocations coming forward. When we had our MAM meeting last Tuesday, I believe Met was meeting Tuesday evening or Tuesday afternoon. So Director Evans will probably get an update on that at the board meeting tomorrow. I don't know if they took any action to clarify. No PR or any newsletters have come out changing anything. These are just some of the things. What you have before you is the water shortage and drought response plan. You have that before you. And that's a model that we all work together on. So the ordinance is a model ordinance between all the agencies so that we don't have 26 agencies jumping 26 different directions. Everything's consistent with what we've historically done. You can see the initial input from the member agencies on whether any potential actions, that's the third bullet down, will be coming back and looking in February is what needs to be done. And then the board at the Water Authority is going to be looking to take any action one way or the other. Depending on what that action is, all of the other agencies then have a choice to move forward. I think that's enough good news on that. Thank you.
Any other questions from the director? No?
No, that's all I have.
Thank you. Legal counsel.
Well, I don't know how I follow that report. I really don't. That's very sobering stuff.
Well, and if you could tell us all your name again, your, I don't want to say the B team, but your.
That's okay. I've
You're
been
standing in.
President Martin, I've been called far worse.
It's better to be called
I'm from a
number two
family
on
of 7
comments.
kids, and I'm the 6th, so I've had a lot of things thrown my way over the years. I'm Blaze Jackson. I'm the law partner of Jeffrey Scott. Regrettably could not be here today for this regular board meeting due to a calendar conflict. Jeff and I did have the distinct pleasure of attending the CASA conference attorneys roundtable meeting last Friday in Coachella. Those of you who are familiar with that acronym, I'll say that for the record, that's the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. And quarterly, when those meetings are held, the attorneys for the various agencies get together and roundtable discuss pending legislation, recent developments in case law, proposed legislation which is either attracting positive, negative, or cautionary attention of the CASA member agencies, And sometimes it's just an opportunity to roundtable current issues for the agencies. Among the topics on the table at last Friday's attorneys meeting, though, were three distinct pieces of legislation that the the agencies are issuing a cautionary opposed recommendation, and I wanted to bring those briefly to the attention of this board. First among these would be Assembly Bill 194, which you might recognize that number from last year. This was Assemblymember Campos's bill, which is still not dead, but this is the one that would actually make a misdemeanor for any presiding officer at a legislative body attempting to or actually prohibiting public criticism of agency activities, policies, programs, and so on and so forth. Existing law, as you might understand, allows for such criticism to take place. This would actually take it a step further and criminalize any attempt by the presider at a meeting from trying to prevent that information from going forward. Needless to say, the CASA member agencies recommend opposing that piece of legislation. Two others. One is Senate Bill 556, introduced and sponsored by Senator Corbett. Senator Corbett's bill arises in the context of what we would quaintly call agency law, and arises in the context of what is seen as consumer protection. What Senator Corbett seeks to prohibit is a contracting agency or entity that contracts for services with an agency like Vallecitos from being able to advertise that they're actually working for or wearing a uniform of the agency with which it is contracted, unless that uniform also has, or the truck that they're driving also has, a disclaimer or a disclosure making it clear to members of the public that we may be doing this work for the water district, but we are actually a separate agency under contract to the water district. Frankly, look at that bill from a common sense standpoint and think your solution is to create this class of workers that are going to look like NASCAR drivers, because before they're done, they're going to have these uniforms that have patches and things all over them, and no one's really going to know what's going on with it. So needless to say, the agencies are looking at that bill with a sort of, why don't we leave well enough alone and not even go down this road. Finally was Assembly Bill 536, the Wagner bill, which attempts to look at, in the contracting business, there are various statutes that all deal with the issue of prompt payment. And prompt payment arises in the context of both private and public works, where an agency like the district has a contract with a general contractor similar to the contract that was awarded tonight. That contractor has a dispute or some sort of discrepancy of performance between it and a lower tier subcontractor. Prompt payment dictates that once that contractor gets a progress payment from the owner of the project, its time limit starts to run, and it must promptly pay all of the lower tier subs for the corresponding levels of work which each of those subcontractors performed for that same progress payment period, unless there's a good faith dispute related to performance. In that setting, a contractor can withhold up to 150% of the disputed amount from the subcontractor as a means of creating a pool of funds with which to address that dispute. What the Wagner bill is trying to do is figure out what can be withheld and what can't be withheld. It's trying to create a class of claims, if you will, that would be exempted from this percentage which could be withheld in the event of a good faith dispute. The problem is the language as this legislation evolves is moving in the wrong direction. It started when it first was introduced with some precise definitions of the types of things that would be exempted, and in its current state it simply defines disputed amount so that it doesn't include the amount of any claim for additional compensation by the subcontractor against the prime contractor. Frankly, that's language that's language intended to be an exception that frankly swallows the rule. And because of that, the member agencies are looking at that bill and saying, this is something we've got to oppose because it simply alters the status quo in a way that's not acceptable to the districts and the owners. I have copies of the text of those bills if any of the board members are interested in reading them for themselves. I have other comments to make for closed session tonight, and unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
I should have stayed Friday, because that sounds like, would have been an invigorating conversation with all you attorneys in one room.
Some of it, we do need clarification on that last topic, because what we'll have is we'll get a call from a sub and saying, well, have you paid the contractor? Yeah. Well, what have you paid them? None of your business. We don't have a contract with you. And so what we have found over the years is that they'll put provisions in their contract 90 days. If there's any dispute whatsoever, they hold the money. And then pretty soon we're drawn into it, and we have to keep saying, you're talking to the wrong person. You gotta talk to the one you have a contract with. So part of it, I would hope they clarify that, because it takes us out of the middle of it. Because we sit there and all we can tell them is he was paid.
You just don't want to take the attorneys out of it, because they're all there. Thank you very much for that great report.
My pleasure, sir.
Moving on, the San Diego County Water Authority.
Well, it looks like it's all gonna be happening tomorrow at the meeting, so, I know we have a big presentation on the BDCP, as well as a lot of talks can go on about the report that Dennis just gave you. So I think I'll have a better update at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Encina Wastewater Authority.
We had a board meeting this morning, and some of the items we talked about were major plant rehabilitation projects award. So there was 2 of those. They talked about the particular projects and the cost and where we're going to go with those. So they're doing some major rehabilitation projects at the Encina Wastewater Authority right now. So these were kind of major projects. Jim was in the CIC meetings that discussed these, and anyway, everything went fine with that. And then we talked about the technology master plan update report, and it seems they're pretty far behind. Did you get that impression, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't made any major improvements, and gosh, I believe they said the year 2000 or
Yeah,
something.
1998 was their last
Yeah.
master plan for technology.
For
98.
technology. So, that kind of rolls over every 2 or 3 years. So, anyway, they're putting together a master plan now, and they're gonna kind of tuck it into future budgets as Tom recommended. And, it was a good presentation. And then they did an update on their community engagement status report, which was pretty detailed, talking about the number of hits they've got all over the world for the different types of what would you call it, social media
Outreach.
outfalls that we've had. So it was a good study. So anyway, that was it. And we have our next meetings coming up on February 19th for the CIC and February 11th for the PSC. That's it.
Thank you very much. Moving on, director's reports on travel, conferences, seminars. I have a few. I'm going to start with the CASA Winter Conference that we went to, same the attorney was just speaking about. And I have to, the best speaker, I thought during the entire time, was Debbie Biggs from Encina. She did a wonderful job, and very seldom would someone go through an entire 20-minute and I don't have questions, and I didn't have any questions. She had answered all the questions that I wanted. So it was interesting, the amount of subjects covered. It started in the afternoon of the 15th, went through Thursday and Friday. Again, I missed that Friday afternoon attorney one. I did also receive, and there were a couple of different ones there, the 218s that we just sent out, which is the rate. I received some copies from people that ours seemed very technical compared to what other people are sending out that's very readable. So I know there's probably attorneys love to argue over what you have to do, but here's one I thought I'd pass into. It seemed very simple. This is how they did their 218.
Okay.
And had nice articles on the front, and on the back went through everything, but it just seemed more people friendly than the one that we sent out that was just very difficult to read. So, just a thought. Came up with that. Also, yesterday went to CAWA, Council on Water Utilities.
Water utilities, yeah.
Thank you. I was down at Stone Ridge, and that was interesting. They did, were telling us about the steelhead and the rainbow trout, and something I never knew was it's the same fish. steelhead and a rainbow trout, the same fish. The question is whether they stay in freshwater or they go to saltwater and come back to freshwater. So it's interesting how they've tried to put San Diego on the endangered species, and we've probably never had either one of the two, and they're imported fish anyhow. But it's interesting how they try, but you heard different sides to it, and I thought they were all very interesting. And were very worthwhile to understand, you know, where our dams are and the problems we now have. But I thought it was interesting, the steelhead runs from Mexico all the way up through the USSR, former USSR. They're all over, and some of them they're very plentiful in. But then now on the East Coast, they're all over the place. So it's just kind of amazing. And the gentleman from our smallest water agency in San Diego County,
Lynn Brazell.
Lynn Brazell.
he gave the presentation on, "Are you kidding me?" And it was very, very funny because he had facts and numbers saying there's no such, you know, there's nothing there to compare. So it was very, very good. Those are my two quickie reports. And Beth, yes?
I was at that one also yesterday morning, and I wanted to say, I thought it was interesting that one of the speakers pointed out that you have these challenges, as we always do in this field, but did you choose to release the water so the steelhead had a way to spawn and rear their youngs, or did you hold it back a little bit so the Arroyo toad could have the drier sandbank for its young? And you realize it is so complicated, and it was very informative and very interesting. I don't know if it gave me any answers, but it gave me a lot of food for thought.
Yeah, I thought that part was interesting too. It's like, which one do you choose?
Which do you choose?
You can have one or the other, you can't have both, because they both. the
And a
water
lot of
needs
people didn't want to
completely
choose either one, so.
different. Right. Build a dam higher. Oh, we're doing that already.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other business, there's Aqua DC 2014, which is coming up. Is anyone here planning on attending that we know of? Because Diane needs to know.
Director Hernandez.
Is he? Okay. Director Hernandez is planning. Okay, director's comments, future agenda items. I have one thing to pass out. That we pass out, once I find where I put it, if you remember, we did our board appointments, our internal board appointments. We didn't have a fifth member at that time. Now that we have the fifth member, I've included him. And I'll pass it out to you at a later date. It's here somewhere. But there's a couple of committees that I will give you a copy of, so you know which committees you're responsible for.
Thank you.
We haven't had very many committee meetings. Oh, and one of the committee meetings, I forgot to do on the last one, conferences, seminars. One of the committee meetings is Jim Hernandez and myself to have a meeting with staff on the outreach program, which we decided not to call it PAP. What are we gonna call it, Lisa? No, we call it Speakers Bureau. Speakers Bureau, is that?
Oh, when you went out, if you go out in the world, it's not the PAP. That's just the name of the committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's just the name of the committee.
Okay. The Speakers Bureau, we got together to come up with some guidelines, thoughts, ideas. Lisa's putting that together. We'll bring it to the full board to look at and to talk it over and see what makes sense, what may not make sense. And we'll get started with that Speakers Bureau. We put 60 to 90 days is what we're looking at. And then maybe staff wouldn't have time to come back with a dashboard. We'll keep them busy doing something else. Okay.
May I make one comment?
Please.
President? I would like to compliment, once again, our promotional department. I think, Lisa, you've done a great job. I was excited to see that we're trying to combine on the rainwater barrel in February, and I liked us being in the Tapped In program. I think the Tapped In is an interesting program itself, encouraging people to drink tap water. So, thank you for that.
Anybody else have anything?
I have one last thing just to bring up is that I thought we had a very nice, get a quaint meeting with the city 3 months ago, and then we were forecasting to have another meeting in 6 months. So I'd like our GM to kind of start working with them to determine a time, because March or April would be 6 months.
Yeah, I actually spoke with the city manager, and we're pulling together an update that we can give to both respective bodies, the different things that we have looked at and what have been accomplished. And then we'll start looking for some timeframes, because again, took us 3 months last time just to get the
Right.
common date.
Yeah, so I figured now's the time to start, to
Sure.
come up with a date for everybody.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll, hearing no other questions, we'll adjourn the meeting. We're going into closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our closed sessions. Oh,
Need a motion? Motion and a second.
I move a motion.
Second?
Second?
Motion is second, all in favor? Aye. Close the meeting. We have our closed session minutes here, so we ask the general public to leave.